Welcome to Pensar Basketball Live. Resident veteran Toronto Raptors guard wing Garrett Temple had a lot to say about the Toronto Raptors, his young team that is currently 2-6. And he said something that really caught my ear yesterday on the Raptors Show with Blake Murphy and Matt Bonner. And he said that once the seal is broken, it's going to be hell for the NBA. And while you can probably chalk this up to, a veteran trying to be supportive of his young team that's currently 2-6, as I mentioned, the Raptors have been in most of these games. The Toronto Raptors, per the Vegas odds, have been favored to lose every single one of these games. Probably due to injuries, possibly due to road record versus home record, but it's worth noting that the Raptors have outperformed expectations. Despite being favored to lose 8 games, they are 2-6. So they're technically overperforming. Despite being favored by, disfavored 10.5, 8.5, 6.5, the Raptors have covered the spread 7 straight games. The Raptors are better than people think they are, but how good can they be? And I think that if I'm being honest, I think that this is the dominant talk around Raptorland. What is the potential of this team? I sometimes lurk on Real GM, and there was a conversation that started a couple of days ago on should the Raptors trade Scottie Barnes for Giannis Antetokounmpo, and I think that's pretty much where this entire conversation dies and ends. Because as good as the Raptors have been, unless Scottie Barnes is that type of player that can really dominate a playoff series, put his imprint on it, you're probably going to struggle in the playoffs. But there's another conversation happening around Raptorland is we haven't seen this team healthy. In the first game, RJ Barrett was missing for the first few games. When RJ Barrett finally came back, we saw a full competent game from RJ Barrett and Scottie Barnes until about a minute left in the fourth quarter. Scottie Barnes goes out with that injury. Raptors lose in overtime. The Raptors were right there against the Kings, right there against Denver, right there against Denver again. And there's an argument to be made that maybe if they're 4-4, given the strength of schedule, we're probably talking about this team a little bit differently. But 2-6 is daunting. And there are no moral victories, in the words of Darko Rajakovic. So we have to really just accept the fact that the Raptors are 2-6. They're behind the 8 ball. They had a tough schedule to start the year. So let's take a look at the positives and negatives, because I want to be nuanced and I want to be very balanced when I discuss this. Let's talk about the positives. Positive number one, Gradey Dick. Cannot talk about the Raptors this season without talking about the ascension of Gradey Dick. The numbers are insane. He is not only through 8 games leading the sophomore class in points per game. He is, okay, just to compare this, because we just talked about this on the panel, he's pretty much leading Amen Thompson, who was a top 4 pick in the 2023 draft. In every statistical category, he's better. 3-point shooter, free throw shooter, field goal percentage is higher, steals are higher, blocks are higher, rebounds are not higher, but assists are higher, points are higher, everything's higher. It's like 21-10. So Gradey Dick has taken a step, and I do believe that is replicable, and I do believe that it is real. Gradey Dick is for real. Partially, my optimism comes from the fact that he is doing this without Scottie Barnes for a lot of the minutes. He's been doing this without Scottie Barnes. And a lot of the time, he's been doing it without Immanuel Quickley. In fact, most of the season, he's been doing it without Immanuel Quickley. And surprise, surprise, Immanuel Quickley is once again listed as questionable for the 7th straight game tonight against the Sacramento Kings. So we've got a player who is probably a little bit over leveraged, but he is operating as a second option on a team on which he was supposed to be the 4th or 5th option. And he's performing relatively, I would say 250 to 300% above expectation. That's a jump. That's a sophomore jump if I've ever seen one. So Gradey is for real. I don't even think Grady's even close to done. We see something new every game. We're seeing the MIDI pull-up package. Here's a fun fact. Put it in your pipe and smoke it. Gradey Dick is leading the entire league, not sophomores, not rookies, not players under 21, the entire league, which includes Kevin Durant, DeMar DeRozan. He's leading all those guys in mid-range field goal percentage. Okay? So this is legit. And I believe that the playmaking that he showed the last game, the defense that he showed last game, the motor that he has shown, The ability, he's top 5 in distance traveled in the NBA. He has been incredible. Let's talk about the next thing, which is RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett and the playmaking acceleration, the shooting acceleration, which isn't a small sample size. This is not down to 4 or 5 games this year, but this is actually going right back to last year. We saw it with Team Canada. RJ Barrett was a better player, in my opinion, this summer for Team Canada than Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray is considered, prior to the season starting, the second best player on the Nuggets. RJ Barrett was better than him this summer. And I would argue RJ Barrett has been exponentially better than him to start the season. Is it time that we respect RJ Barrett as more than a quote unquote toxic asset? Sure, absolutely. RJ Barrett's 24. Players are not done growing at 24. He can still get better. We can see more of an acceleration on defense. We have seen participation on defense. Can we see a really good defender? Now, it's also worth noting he's carrying quite a load offensively. He's played one game with Scottie Barnes. That was the Denver game in which the Raptors led almost wire to wire against Denver. And then, of course, Scottie goes out, RJ misses the three, and it's all lost. But it's not lost. The Raptors were in that game. They were leading that game. And had Scottie not gone out, they probably would have won that game. Since that game, however, against fairly decent competition, which includes the Los Angeles Lakers, they're currently slumping, which includes a win over Sacramento, in which he was huge, which includes another loss against Denver, in which, he missed the same shot and it wasn't so great. I would argue that RJ Barrett has been massively over leveraged. But how has he done with that over leverage? Well, he's been a great playmaker. His assist percentage has jumped double, more than double, over his previous career high. So that's good. He's still scoring the ball at a really elite rate. He's getting to the line a lot more than he did in that first game. So I think that, you have a legit player here. And it's worth noting that the young guys have contributed. Every game, we see something different from one of these rookies. Jameson Battle one game, Jonathan Mobo another game. Jacoby Walter will have his time, right? Jamal Shed has had moments. So these are young players that most of us coming into the season were like, these guys are probably going to be in the G League. They're probably not going to be banked on to contribute very much. But here are players who are in their first NBA season that are really contributing. Then there's, of course, if we're not talking about Gradey and we're not talking about RJ, in terms of surprises this season, we got to talk about Ochai Agbaji. Ochai Agbaji went from possibly the second most negative player. And that's the interesting thing about Ochai and Gradey is the work is really showing because these guys were two of the most negative contributors to the Raptors last season. And right now, I would argue they're two of the four most positive contributors to the Raptors. Ochai is starting. Ochai is seeing starting level defense. He is seeing starting level offense as a defender. He is absolutely over leveraged as a starter at this point in his career, and he is holding water perfectly. He's been great defensively. He's been really good as a cutter. He's been great defending the rim. He's shooting the piss out of the basketball. So Ochai Agbaji is like a real rotation guy, like to the point where right now, if the Raptors get healthy and he's out of the rotation, I'm going to riot because he is valuable. You don't have a player like him as a transition athlete. He's awesome. I would argue there's literally there's nothing that even resembles Ochai Agbaji on this roster because of his positional versatility. Am I crazy or did I watch Ochai Agbaji guard Nikola Jokic? Am I crazy or did I watch Ochai Agbaji switch out to LaMelo Ball? Well, that is positional versatility if I've ever seen it. And last I checked, that's the positional versatility that got OG Anunoby paid $42 million this year. Positional versatility, especially for a role player, is huge. It's enormous. It's a really good athlete. As we've seen with numerous alley-oop dunks and finishes, offense is very simple. Just make shots, cut, hit, finish at the basket. He can do that. We haven't talked about the elephant in the room, which is, to be completely fair, to as good as Gradey and RJ have been, probably you're missing your two best players right now, which is Emmanuel Quickley, who I believe is going to take a massive jump, and Scottie Barnes, whose jump we were seeing in the Denver game. We saw the best version of Scottie before he got hurt, but then he got hurt, and we're unfortunately forced to judge a 4-game sample A 4-game sample in which I don't believe 2 of the games were that great. So this could get better. This could get so much better. And then, of course, you got to consider who you're playing. You're playing Jamal Shed, who can't shoot right now. A lot of hope for Jamal Shed. He can't shoot right now. You're playing Jacoby Walter, heavy minutes. He's losing his minutes right now. Love to Jacoby. Jacoby's going to be great. But this is absolutely equivalent to playing Jalen McDaniels or Gradey Dick last year in the beginning. Those guys were costing you wins, right? So the Raptors, when they were 9-11 last year with OG and Pascal Siakam, Jakob Poeltl, Dennis Schroeder, Scottie Barnes, that lineup, it's worth noting that the bench was pretty much bleeding minutes. Gary Trent was bleeding minutes. Uh, Grady was bleeding minutes. All of them. Malachi was bleeding minutes. And you were like, man, you're 9-11, despite the fact that your bench is so ass. Okay. Well, what happens when Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk come back? Kelly Olynyk wasn't on this team. Bruce Brown wasn't on this team to start last season. I would argue those are the guys that you got back for some of the things that you gave out. And that's a lot of depth. So suddenly I'm seeing like an 8-man rotation that is solid. Bruce Brown would be in any team's rotation. De facto. Kelly Olynyk would be in almost any team's rotation. Maybe OKC, but that's the only one where I'm like, maybe he'd be right outside the rotation. These are rotation players, and you've been missing them every second of this season. So I understand Garrett Temple's optimism. There's also something that's worth noting, which is the Raptors have had no favors from the schedule. Early throughout this year, we've all been talking about it. The Raptors have the hardest strength of schedule. Okay. All of this presented, let's talk about something else. This team has been super fun to watch. They've been competitive. They've competed really hard. Okay. They're in these games. They're losing them down the wire. They're pretty much losing them in the fourth quarter where they goddamn lose their minds. Suddenly, all the stuff that brought them to that point is no longer on their docket. Okay, so those are the positives. Raptors are knocking at the door. RJ's taking a step. Grady's taking a step. Emmanuel Quickley and Scottie Barnes will take a step. You will get some depth back. Some of your surprise pieces are popping. You've got additional depth on the bottom of your roster that you weren't expecting. Guys like Mobo, guys like Jameson Battle, guys like Davion, guys like Jamal Shed, who are going to fall down the pecking order, and suddenly you're going to be a lot deeper than the average team. That's not something that most of us thought. Most of us did not think the Raptors were in the upper echelon of depth. Right now, you could make a strong argument that you're absolutely middle of the pack, or even on the higher end of middle of the pack in terms of depth. Okay, that's the positives. Let's talk about the negatives. Let's talk about both sides, because I do believe in nuance and I do believe in being fair. And I do believe that if we're just going to hype and glaze and act like this team is going to win 50 games when Scottie and Emmanuel quickly come back, we might not be missing the point. We might be missing the point. So let's talk about a little bit of negatives. Negative number one, you are 2-6. That's done. That's firm. You've lost 3 absolutely winnable games. You absolutely should be 5-3. And the fact that you're not 5-3 is going to compromise, because at the end of the season, when you're 41-41 and you miss the playoffs, it won't matter that you slipped 3 away. So I respect the process. I respect the hell out of the process. I love what Darko Rajakovic is doing. I love that he's got these guys bought in. I love that they're in these games, but there are no moral victories at the end of the season. You cannot go to the league and say, hey, we should make the playoffs because we were right in these games. You lost. That's over. Okay. Negative number one, your record right now sucks. Right. Negative number two, and this is me playing devil's advocate. The schedule hasn't actually been that strong. Uh-oh. So this is the talking point coming into the season, but this is what's wrong with Tankathon. Tankathon does strength of schedule based on last season. Can we agree that the Raptors haven't exactly faced the best version of some of these teams? Sacramento is a disaster right now. The Lakers are falling apart. Yes, you played those teams close, but please be honest. These are not contenders. Right? The Denver Nuggets are a mess. They were in a game against the Brooklyn Nets. Okay. They are awful. Not awful. Not awful. In the second game you faced them, they were missing Jamal Murray, and then they lost Aaron Gordon, and they still beat you. This is a negative, but it's fair. Don't accuse me. Don't kill the messenger. Just be objective about this. That's fair, right? So the strength of schedule based on last season, probably had the Cavs as your third most difficult opponent. Right now, I would argue, based on how the Cavs are playing, the Cavs were absolutely your most difficult opponent, and they blew you out by 30, wire to wire. And you had Scottie, and you had Emmanuel quickly for 14 of those games, 14 of those minutes. Okay, that's bearish take number one. Okay, bearish number two. RJ Barrett and Gradey Dick have dominated over the last 4 games, which is having a lot of us dancing in our heads about what these guys can be when those other guys come back. It doesn't always work that way. 2 factors to consider. You've played some really bad perimeter defenses. I'm just being honest. Don't shoot the messenger. Sacramento, terrible. Malik Monk's awful. Fox, overrated. DeMar, pylon. The Sacramento Kings had 2 good perimeter defenders, and that's Keon Ellis, who didn't play enough for my money. He didn't play enough, and you had Keegan Murray, and he's good. He's not Herb Jones, he's not OG Anunoby, but he's good. Okay, so that's the first thing. Gradey and RJ's numbers are coming against really incompetent perimeter defenders. Number 2, let's keep the bearish stuff going. Who are you better than in the East? Full health, full stride, full stride. Who are you better than? Not now, because you're ahead of schedule. You played all summer together. You're obviously a very connected group. You're playing your asses off. We're seeing this in the West too, guys. We're seeing this with the Golden State Warriors, who, despite a lack of talent, which, I mean, let's be real, they have a lot more talent than the Raptors, but a lack of talent relative to the conference, they are dominating. Why? Because they're connected. They play a brand of basketball that is known to succeed in the regular season, and they're playing extremely hard. The Raptors are playing extremely hard. A lot of these other teams are not. A lot of these other teams are sleepwalking into the schedule. This is what we talked about early. You might surprise early because despite your strength of schedule, teams are looking at you and they're seeing no Scottie Barnes, no Emmanuel quickly, and they're coming in and sleeping on you. And then they're going to beat you in the fourth quarter, and you're gonna celebrate the fact that you were within 3 points, but it was never really in question. I'm gonna tell you right now, the Raptors were up by 10 against the Nuggets. And I could have sworn on my parents' grave, I would have sworn that the Raptors were going to lose that game. The minute we saw Jokic come out in the third quarter, I was like, okay, this is just a matter of time. This is about to fall off. And about the midway of the third quarter, I was like, this is over. So you can take the moral victory, but in the end, the team that wins probably won for a reason. In the last game, however, I would argue that reason was the refs. But the refs have not been on the Raptors side for years. So why are we surprised? That's another bearish element of it. Here's another bearish element of it. When you inevitably trade Bruce Brown and or Chris Boucher, you're going to incorporate a new teammate. When you bring Scottie Barnes and Emmanuel quickly back, there will be an adjustment. You may lose a couple games on that adjustment. Need I remind you, 2021, 2022, the Raptors started 7-4. Pascal Siakam comes back. The Raptors lose 4 straight. Why? Is it because Pascal Siakam's a terrible basketball player? Possibly not. It is probably because you had to implement a very large part of your offense. Scottie and Emmanuel quickly are going to change the way this basketball team plays, which means it's going to change RJ's looks. It's going to change Gradey's looks. And trust me, if your solution is, well, let's just don't bring those guys back. Let's just roll it out with Gradey and RJ. You're insane. That's not the solution at all. Okay? The solution is at some point you're going to have to incorporate these guys back, and it's going to take an adjustment period, at which point you might be 2-13, 2-14, 3-14, 5-20. I don't know when those guys are going to come back. Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk are also going to take some implementation time, right? Kelly is a major playmaker. Bruce is a secondary playmaker. I think the way Darko envisioned the second unit would be Kelly sort of running point center. And if that's the case, him being out of rhythm and not having played basketball for the last month is going to hurt you, right? It is going to hurt you. So whether this is for development or Kelly's back is sore and Bruce's leg and Scottie's eye and Emmanuel quickly's back, like all these things, at some point you're going to incorporate these guys back. And if you do trade Bruce Brown and or Chris Boucher, you're going to incorporate more people back. Okay. So those are the bearish terms. The question then remains, who are you better than in the East? This is a really important question to ask. So ask yourself, are you better than Boston? No. Are you better than New York? No. There are some teams that are slumping in the East, which probably should have gone into the positives, but that can also be put into the negatives. because you have teams like Milwaukee that are horrible right now. Will they remain horrible? I have no idea. Honestly, I have learned not to bet for. I've learned to bet against Doc Rivers is a really good just overall sample. Like it's a good idea to just bet against Doc Rivers being bad. But yeah, I mean, at some point you would assume that the Bucks are going to figure it out. So there's a chance that the Raptors do end up like 5-15 by the time Garrett Temple's prophecy of hell for the NBA comes true. At which point you pretty much have to run the table, right? You can't just be a 500 team the rest of the way, because if you're a 500 team the rest of the way and you're 5-15 and you're 500 the rest of the way, you end up as a 36 win team, which you probably don't want to be, because that's like either right at the bottom of the play-in as a 10th, or it's right outside the play-in, depending on how strong the rest of the conference is. So you have to be better than 500, which is possible because your schedule does get easier. But the point of strength of schedule is based on last season. So we should probably look at the schedule based on this season. This is the Raptors' schedule. Okay. So we've had Cleveland, Philly, Minnesota, Denver, Charlotte, LA, Sacramento, Denver. The remaining games, let's just look at the near term. It's Sacramento, not a great team tonight, but they're at home. It's a 10 o'clock game. Holy shit. And you're probably not favored to win this game. LA Clippers, right? You can be competitive against the Clippers for sure. The Lakers, desperate for a win on a bit of a slide at home. I think that's going to be tough. Milwaukee, desperate. Detroit, brimming with confidence. Boston, forget about it. Indiana, I don't know. Minnesota, Cleveland, Detroit, New Orleans, Miami. I mean, the back to back with the home and home against Miami. I would think that would be the turnaround of the season. And obviously, that's right when Scottie Barnes is supposed to come back. Scottie Barnes probably coming back against Detroit. I mean, if things go well, probably Detroit, but probably New Orleans. So that's where you would start your run. Now, if at that point you have 5 wins, let's just count them out. Let's get really optimistic about where you can go with this schedule. I would say, okay, let's say you have 5 wins at that point. You get one against Miami. Let's say you split home and home. Jimmy goes nuts one game, you go nuts the other game. Let's say you get Brooklyn. Okay, sure. You're against Houston on Sunday, December 22nd, right before Christmas. Let's say you get that. I mean, we're really stretching it here. Let's say you get December 29th against Atlanta. That's 4 wins. Brooklyn, 5 wins. Detroit, January 11th, 6 wins. Let's say you get the Milwaukee, 7 wins. Let's say you get both at Atlanta. That's 9 wins. Let's say you go on a streak. Atlanta, New Orleans, Washington, Chicago. Let's say you win all of those games. You see what I mean? You see what I mean? Falling into a hole early means the same thing, which means you got to make it up somewhere else. So I understand when you start looking at February, March, April, there's a lot of 5 game streaks. There's a lot of potential 5 game streaks. But at some point, the Toronto Raptors are going to have to become a 600 team to make up for the fact that right now they're losing a lot of games, and they probably will continue to lose a lot of games. So is it worth it? Is it worth it? I mean, we've had the tank, no tank, tank, no tank debate on this channel endlessly. It is nonstop. It is the conversation of conversations. After every single win, forget the tank. After every single loss, oh, we need to tank for Cooper Flag. I made a video earlier this off season, which I said there's like a point in the Raptors season where they're going to have to make a decision to go one way or the other. And that will include shutting down players, trading vets, playing the youth, etc. And you're just going to have to go for it. Last year, the Raptors went for it after Scottie's injury because the plan was still technically within reach. But that's largely because they started out 9-11. See what I mean? They started out 9-11. It started to go sideways. They traded OG. It started to go sideways again. They lost to Detroit. Then they traded Pascal Siakam, and then they were still within striking distance of the play-in. They started winning games, and Scottie went out, and they just shut it all down. So this year, the math and the decision making gets pushed earlier into the schedule because it's not necessarily what you think, it's what you can defend. And if the Raptors are 5-20 after 25 games, because that was the what people said, that was the brutal schedule, 5-20, right? If they're 5-20, I don't think anyone is going to complain if you trade away some veterans at all. I do believe, however, that what Garrett Temple said has some validity. I'm not sure when the first part of his quote is going to be true because what he said is when the seal breaks, it's going to be hell for the NBA. And of course, he was addressing learning how to win. He referenced something that Darko said, which is first you got to learn how to practice, then you got to learn how to compete, and then you got to learn how to win. Well, I can tell you, as someone who has studied basketball for most of my life, that the way the Raptors are playing defense right now is not designed to win anything. The way they're playing defense right now is meant to develop defensive tendencies and habits. The way they're playing offense right now is basically trying to develop habits. If you want my honest opinion, I'll add one more tack to the bearish side. Some of these numbers are really, really inflated. It's not just that Gradey is going up against LaMelo Ball, D'Angelo Russell, and bad defenders. That's not the only reason. Because, of course, he's done a couple of possessions against some good defenders and he's had some success. I'm not downplaying anything Grady's doing or anything RJ's doing, but I think that it's worth noting that the Raptors' defense has been so ass and their offensive pace has been so high. They are seventh out of 30 teams in terms of pace. They are currently 30th in defensive rating, and remarkably, they are 10th in offensive rating. So the offense is working, right? But it's like what we say with the Bud offenses, in Atlanta, in Milwaukee, and now in Phoenix. This is assist farming. See the movement. The Raptors have broken the 30 assist mark, I believe, 5 straight games. If I'm not mistaken, it's been 5 straight games. And a lot of guys are getting crazy numbers of assists, right? If you want to look at just very briefly, give me 1 second here. In terms of your points per game scores, leaders, RJ Barrett's averaging 26 points per game. Grady's averaging 21.6 points per game. I would argue those stats are massively inflated. I'm going to be honest with you. Those stats are like 25% inflated, not just because of the modern NBA, but because of the system that the Raptors run. Even these assist numbers are slightly inflated. 7.8 assists for RJ Barrett after previously having a career high of 9 coming into this season. It's a little inflated, and it's inflated by virtue of the design of the offense. Again, it's like Tyus Jones in the Phoenix Suns offense. Yeah, he's getting a lot of assists, but is he doing anything? Is he creating advantages? So tonight, what I want to watch and again, I think there's another thing that we can put on the bullish side. We haven't seen the best of RJ Barrett yet. I think that would be fair to say. He just came back from shoulder injury. He lost momentum. Maybe there's another version of RJ that's even a step up from this version. Maybe there's a 50 points, RJ. Maybe there's like a 40 points per game for 2 straight weeks, RJ. Hell if I know. He's 24 years old. Young kids with high potential grow in interesting ways. Maybe there's like a 10-game streak where Gradey breaks 20 points every single game, and we can be like, damn, it doesn't matter who you put on him, right? So overall, you're playing a lot of these guys that are not very productive for you right now. And you're still farming a ton of assists. Here, let me take a look at the analytics here. These are the Raptors players that are leading in terms of box plus minus. There's Emmanuel Quickly, Ochai Agbaji, Scottie Barnes. Then there's Ulrich Shamshay in his glorious 5 minutes, Emmanuel Quickly in his glorious 14 minutes. But if you filter out for players who've played more than 20 minutes, there's your RJ Barrett at 0.7. There's like nobody's doing anything superstar adjacent right now, right? Gradey Dick at 0.6. That's very positive, man. If I show you Gradey Dick last year to this year, take a look at the jump. I was going to make a graphic about this and just probably lose my mind, but I did talk about Gradey today on the panel. Take a look at his per 100 splits. Give me a W if you can see that. Hang on, make this a little bit bigger for y'all. I mean, we're talking about a jump per 100 possessions from 19 to 31. We're talking about 2.6 assists to 3.3. Rebounding's a little bit down, but his free throw percentage is up, his 2-point percentage is up, his 3-point percentage is up. Like, what is he not doing well? He's doing everything well. He's jumped his 2-point field goal percentage by damn near 5 points, 5% up. And he's facing harder. And last year, he was a negative 5.4 boxes minus again for most of the season. I mean, shit. At this point last year, I want to say he was negative 12, negative 10, negative 12. He was absolutely the worst player in basketball. But this year, positive 0.6. Next year, positive 3.7. The following year, positive 5.0. And boom, now you're a perennial all star forever. So, look, the future is great. I don't know how soon the future is going to come. That's the point of this video. I wanted to talk about it. Really wanted to. I'm not raining on anyone's parade. I'm not pumping the brakes. I'm saying be objective. Be objective about who you're better than in the East. Are you better than Cleveland? No. Are you better than Indiana? Probably not. Are you better than Boston? Hell the hell no. Are you better than New York? It would take a lot of injuries. Are you better than Orlando once Paolo comes back? Probably not. So there's at least 5 teams there. And then you got to talk about Philly when they get healthy, right? If you look at the Eastern standings right now, there's not a lot of teams that are popping out, right? There's a lot of teams that have disappointed, and it's leading a lot of people to prematurely declare this a really bad conference in which anybody can go up. But the truth is, when Joel Embiid comes back, if Joel Embiid comes back for the Sixers, that's a really difficult team for the Raptors to beat. They just don't match up well with Joel Embiid. They do not match up well with Tyrese Maxey. And despite the fact that they stopped him, stopping him with Joel Embiid is going to be a different equation. I think at some point the Raptors are going to realize that they do need 3 things on this roster. Number 1, a really great backup point guard. I'm talking like Peyton Pritchard level backup point guard, like a real problem defensively, offensively, both ends. TJ McConnell is an example, but maybe doesn't shoot as well as you would like. They need that player. And if you believe that Davion Mitchell is going to become that player, hallelujah. Good for you. I don't know if he's going to become that player. If you think Jamal Shedd's going to become that player, I could actually live with that. That might actually happen. Hang on here. I am sent super chat and was asking about it in the chat. You probably know just in case. Oh, Liam. Oh, thank you. You sent a super chat to tell me about a super chat. Ah, Liam underscore R. Wait, no, Liam underscore. Is that what is R? 10.9. Is that rupees? Cool, man. Or is that rubles? I don't know. Anyways, it's not Canadian currency, but thank you very much for the super chat. 1 to 4 pick next draft to Raps if great holds the face. I'm so sorry if I don't completely understand the super chat. I'm trying to understand it. 1 to 4 pick next draft to Raps. So the Raptors will draft top 4 in next year's draft, if that's what I'm understanding. And Cast 2929 W Rob W the panel W community. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. Hope you caught the panel last couple of days. That was cool. Liam saying, who is the face of the league as it currently stands? I'm not sure there is a face of the league. Of the Raptors, Scottie Barnes, for sure. Scottie is the face. Yes, Scottie is the face. Okay. So, yeah, overall, I'm not really sure if Garrett Temple is right for now. Like, I'm not sure if they're going to be a problem this year. What I am sure of is that they need 3 types. So I said the backup point guard. The second is an elite 2-way transition athlete. Who am I talking about? I'm basically talking about a hybrid between Jacoby Walter and Ochai Agbaji, like that type of player. And there's a player like that in the draft. His name is VJ Edgecombe. And he just damn near dunked over a dude's head yesterday or 2 days ago. He's really interesting, and I can't help but think that he would fit really well with what the Raptors are doing. That's a player that's missing. And then an elite rim protector. Now, it's possible that Jacoby Walter, Jamal Shedd, and Jonathan Mobo become these players. It's possible. It is extremely unlikely that that will happen in the next 6 months. So, It's not all bad news. It might not be this season. It might not be till late in this season. But if the Raptors do the same shit again, the same summer, that same work, that same development staff, that same kumbaya, that same chemistry, I am positive that the vision that we have for the Raptors, that video that I made, the Raptors will contend by 2026, will come true. It's worth noting also, there's more conferences in the East. So I keep going back and forth, but bear with me. If you want to compete in the near term with Boston and in the long term with OKC, you're going to need more talent. So people saying tank, you need one more draft pick. I think those are two separate things. You need to develop these young players to become better players, and you definitely need to hit on this next draft pick. This 2025 first rounder, whether it is a 15th overall pick, 12th overall pick, 11th overall pick, second overall pick, sixth overall pick, or first overall pick, is going to be probably the fifth chip in this thing that you're doing here. At which point, you'll have to shuffle the deck and decide which of your pieces fit together, probably next year, and which don't. At which point, your 2025-2026 season will be spent determining that. At which point, I do believe the Raptors will be a really good playoff team next year. I would lock it in. Barring health issues, barring a complete cataclysmic meltdown, the Toronto Raptors will be a really good force in the East. And if you're asking about future, I like their future more than Orlando. That's me being a homer as hell because there isn't another person that I know that I trust that believes me when I say that. And there probably isn't another person with a platform even half as large as Pensar Basketball that would agree with that. But I'm going to say it. I think the Raptors' future is better than Orlando's future. That's just me because I think Gradey is that good. I think Scottie is that good. And I do believe that their upside is just that high. I think OKC's future is brighter, however, in the near term. I do think San Antonio, with all their draft picks, potentially 2 top 6 picks coming up in this year's draft, can get brighter very quickly. I do think Orlando is competitive, even though I think our future is brighter. I definitely think our future is brighter than Indiana, especially like seeing Benedict Mathurin a little bit more closely this year. And he was going to be a huge part of it. Cleveland is competitive. And I do believe in the rise of Evan Mobley and maybe the resurgence of yeah, I see it. I see it with that team. I see it with Cleveland. I could see Cleveland being a really big problem. And then, of course, there are teams that are outright going to tank, like Detroit and probably eventually Detroit, Washington, the Brooklyn Nets. At which point, they're probably going to get a really high end pick in this year's draft. And if Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, VJ Edgecombe, Cooper Flag become that level of player, well, then when you enter your championship window, if you're the Raptors, when you enter your contention window with Scottie, 2026 to 2020, let's say 2034. So that's your 8 year. I'm not going as generous as Calvin Booth saying a 10-year window around Jokic. I'm saying 8 years, 2026 to 2034. That's your window with Scottie. So during that window, you will have teams that tanked this year and maybe even next year that are going to come up behind you and they're going to push you. At which point, talent will eventually run out. I don't think it's going to take Cooper Flag that long. Watching him at Duke, dude, I got to tell you, watching him at Duke the other night, I was lower than the consensus on him, but I'm getting very high right now. Like his motor is insane. His ability to guard like 5 positions is absolutely mental. His just his playmaking and his basketball awareness. And, yeah, sure, he missed all his threes in that game, but it doesn't matter to me. He would be a great fit for what the Raptors do. I mean, he's a smart player. He's a great off-ball player. He's great on ball. He can handle, he can do all that Kelly like initiating from the 4 or 5 position stuff, and he can really protect at the rim. He would be a dream for the Toronto Raptors, an absolute dream, not just from a marketing perspective, just from a basketball fit synergy perspective. Because a lot of the stuff, Gradey Dick, Scottie Barnes, these are high motor players. RJ Barrett, to some extent, offensively, at least very high motor. I think he would fit very well. So anyway, all that to say, the Raptors' future is bright. It just may not come as soon as some of us are expecting. And it may be deliberately diverted and pushed off because the Raptors get into a tough place on the standings. There is an elephant in the room. Something really major happened last night. I don't like to talk about politics, but a lot of people messaged about this. So if y'all would like to talk about it, we can talk about it. If you don't want to talk about it, we'll cut this off right here. We don't. So I'm gonna let y'all decide if we should talk about this because I do have some stuff to say, and I do think that it would be important to hear it. But y'all let me know. Do we keep Darko in deep playoffs? Can't type much. Liam with another super chat. Thank you very much. Yes, I think you have to give him a chance. I think you have to give him a chance. And Rue saying, let me hear your political take. Jason Watson saying, talk about it. B Rich saying, leave it alone, please. Canada isn't a talk about it, pretty much. Maybe Alberta. Maroon saying, I grew up in the States. I'd love to talk some politics. And Jason Williams saying no. Okay, so we got a lot for yes, a lot for no. So why don't I just issue a warning that in the next 25 seconds, I'm going to talk about patience, politics, and thinking for yourself in a broader sense. I'm not going to malign either candidate. I'm not going to talk about the fallout. I'm not going to talk about the pros and cons. I just want to talk about making up your own mind for yourself in a broader sense. So if you do not want to hear what I have to say about it, because I am not a politician and I'm not a political activist and I am not, and you're not here for that, you can leave. And I will not take it. I will not take it. I will not take any offense to it. Okay, so last night, I had a flashback to 2016, and some of you all know in 2016, I was at an election party. It was a very, very big deal here for some reason. I'd never seen an election party in Toronto for the American elections, especially the American presidential elections. But you know, I I grew up in the states, and I grew up around a lot of different people in the states. I grew up in inner cities. I grew up in Washington Heights for a bit, but I also had, let's say, dabbles, dabbles in the suburbs. So been to Somerville, New Jersey, lived there for a bit. There were parts in Nashville where I felt very suburban. So I've certainly seen a school which was 97%, 98% white and a lot of rural working class Americans. I've also been in the inner city where I swear like there were two white kids in the whole school. So it's great. It's been a great perspective for me, and I've been able to harness some of that, which, when I was younger, I used to hate moving around as much as I did. I was like, why am I in five different countries before the age of 8? Why am I, always switching schools all the time? Now I consider it a blessing because I learned to talk to all different people. And that's been really a bit of a blessing for me because I try not to judge people right away based on their political leanings or their race or ethnicity, gender, etc. I just want to talk. And so 2016 happens and we're at this political, thing. And we did this vote before the election, before the ballots started coming in around 7 o'clock, and we were all picking like who was supposed to win. And they tallied it up. There were 280 of us there. 278 of us thought Hillary Clinton was going to win in 2016, and two of us thought Donald Trump was going to win. And I was one of those people. I was one of those people, and people thought I was an idiot. Like, and I was trying to explain to people the entire night why he was going to win. Because let me decode something for you. I don't want to talk about politics as a vote for Trump. Okay. I don't know who I'm voting for is probably a vote for Trump. They both make good points is probably a vote for Trump. They're both horrible, terrible people is probably a vote for Trump. People code their Trump loyalty, and it's partially because of public backlash against people who, because there's a lot of codes, like if you were if you were a sensible person who just wanted to vote on Trump's economic policy and you have an issue with open borders and you're saying I'm going to vote for Trump, but you don't want to be aligned with being a misogynist, racist, sexist, homophobe, so you're just like I'm going to keep this to myself before I end up on a TikTok reel for voicing my opinion. And so that's really where it is. That's the silent vote. And if you talk to people, if you openly talk to people, especially if you look like me and you're able to talk to people, they will open up to you about the fact that they are going to vote for him, even though they're not happy about it. And I think that is really tragic when a democracy ends up speaking its mind and nobody's happy. I'll guarantee you, as you know, and I'm very empathetic to the fact that a lot of, and by the way, I just want to clarify this. I thought he was going to win again yesterday. I thought he was going to win because she was late, because the Dems absolutely mishandled this entire election, because what she was saying was not connecting, because she had, unfortunately, a lot of people that were very against her. And if y'all listen to, you know, I'll just call it Black YouTube, like Kwame Brown, Judge Joe Brown, Ticket TV, etc. There wasn't a lot of support for her in a lot of these communities. A lot of people made mention of the fact that she was basically code switching. She was willing to be white when it was convenient. She was willing to be Indian when it was convenient, willing to be black when it was convenient, willing to be pro, incarceration for young black men when it was convenient, and then pro, opening up some of those laws to remove some of the laws that prohibit the acceleration of black people. So it felt like she didn't stand for anything. Her message was messy, right? Her message was very messy. And when your message is messy and somebody else's message is very clear, even though it's completely bullshit, it becomes a little bit easier for people to peg you into a box. It also matters a lot that in three straight elections, Donald Trump has run for the Republican nominee, has been the Republican nominee, and in the two times that he's faced women, he has won. And the one time he faced a dude, even though that dude honestly is probably worse, in my opinion, than both the women, he won. I mean, he lost. But why did he lose? Is it because America is not ready for a female president? Is it because there are some men who are always going to vote for a man, and there aren't any women who are always going to vote for a woman? Or maybe the number of men who will always vote for a man is always going to outnumber the number of women who will always vote for a woman. Because if you look at the demographics, in 2016, Don Lemon said this was a white lash against a black president. That's what he said. He said, this is a white lash. And you were made to believe, if you had voted for Trump, even if you were black, that you were not really black, which is what Joe Biden said, right? Joe Biden, prior to the 2020 election, said, if you voted for him, you ain't black. Holy crap. I think black people are tired of being talked down to. I think black people are tired of being told who to vote for because of the color of their skin or some sort of ethnicity thing. So you can absolutely say two things are true. Number one, you can 100% say that she's the more sensible candidate, the more qualified candidate. Damn near, I might be a more sensible and qualified candidate than Donald Trump. You can also say that people are sick and tired of being told what to think and what to do. And I think that this is a sobering reality for Democrats, that their entire shtick about white people voted for Trump, everybody else voted for truth, justice. I think that it is a sobering reality that the Hispanic vote and the black vote swung for Donald Trump. That is a sobering reality because the man is damn near senile. He speaks a lot of nonsense. I do not like him at all. Just to be clear, I'm just be clear about that. If you support him, cool, good for you. We can still talk. We could have a beer. We could have a beer and you support Donald Trump. I'm not one of those people, but I'll tell you right now, when I was 12 years old, I was living in New York. Donald Trump was the king of New York, and he was a Democrat, by the way. Donald was a Democrat. Dana White was a Democrat. Joe Rogan was a Democrat. Elon Musk was a Democrat. Rosie O'Donnell was a Democrat. All these people on the far right now that you consider misogynist pigs were all Democrats. Diddy was a Democrat too. Epstein, Weinstein, keep going down the list. If you're famous, you're probably Democrat. The Democrats used to be a party, at least, when I grew up in the States, the way I understood it, Democrats were the party for the poor people. We were poor people, so we voted Democrat. My parents voted Democrat their whole lives. We didn't have any money, so we weren't voting for the rich people. Democrats were also the party of the poor people, the minorities, black people, brown people, people that were my neighbors. So it made sense to vote with my people, vote with my friends, vote with our community. That made sense. This is a nuanced discussion. There's no good and bad here, okay? Just want to be clear about that. But then you think about Democrat run cities. You think about Kamala Harris's record in California, what she did as the attorney general. You think about Rahm Emanuel in Chicago and the hell that is Chicago relative to when I was a kid, what Chicago was to what it is today is hell. California in the 80s and 90s was a great place. California today is sickening at places. There is loads of drugs, loads of danger. It is a really nightmarish place. You got to consider people's bills. You got to consider inflation. You got to consider what people are feeling. And I think that it's very easy for the Republicans to present a message that the Democrats do not understand the average person. They're Hollywood elites, they're in their bougie ivory towers. And can you imagine that a billionaire who ain't cared about anybody in his whole life but himself gets to be the voice of the working class? How insane is that? Donald Trump is the voice of the working class. I'll tell you, when I grew up in New York, this guy was a big deal in New York. One day, somebody gave me a Donald Trump cologne. I threw that shit in the garbage. It smelled like celery. It smelled like celery. It was terrible. I hated this dude. I hated the fact that he put his name on everything. I hate what he stands for. I hate so many things about him. But you know what? The left brought this on. I'm going to be honest about that. I'm going to be real about that. If I lose subscribers, I lose subscribers. You created him. You have created him by dictating freedom of speech, by dictating terms, by forcing people to accept things that they're not ready to accept, by calling people stupid. Look at the reaction. Look at the reaction, and especially from white people, no offense, in 2016. What was the reaction to Donald Trump winning the election? Oh, the uneducated whites. Oh, yeah, I'm sure everyone in Iowa just enjoyed being called uneducated. I'm sure everyone in Michigan, everyone who voted for him just loved being talked down to by CNN anchors. That was fun. You can't win people over this way. It starts with empathy. And unfortunately, when the Democrats have done such a terrible job, you've opened the window to this one way, absolutely clueless narcissist who has absolutely botched, the response to the pandemic, absolutely botched foreign affairs. Didn't start a war. Congratulations. But man, if he could have started a war. Okay? Right? So I think we need to be honest about what these parties represent. If you believe that being right wing implies that a person is racist, sexist, homophobic, if you believe that every single person supporting Trump hates black people, you are wrong. Donald Trump is not unfit to be president because he hates black people. Because I got news for you. Donald Trump doesn't hate black people. Donald Trump doesn't hate black people. Donald Trump hates everybody. Donald Trump doesn't like white people, black people, Hispanic people, Puerto Ricans, Chinese people, Russian. He don't like anybody. He likes green people. He likes people with money. If you got money and you're black, Mike Tyson, come on down. He'll be friends with you. If you're attractive and you're black, he'll date you. Do you remember Donald Trump press conference? One of his supporters said to him, "Mr. Trump, you are the real first black president." Oh wow. The insult to Barack Obama. And he winked at him. There ain't no racist white person, and I've met a lot of racist white people in my life. There's not a racist white person in the world who would wink at you for calling them black if they really believed what racists believe. He's just an opportunist. He is a narcissist, and he is the type of person that gets ahead a lot in this world. But if you incorrectly frame him as a misogynist, racist, blah, 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 you miss the picture. He's just deeply stupid and unqualified, but very confident, super bully, willing to extend beyond and seem unhinged. And when a political candidate does things that you've never seen a political candidate do in your life, you'll probably think they're outside shot. Now let's talk about why people voted for him. Two major points. It wasn't the abortion issue. The two main points were fear of immigrants, xenophobia, Xenophobia has been on the rise in the United States, if y'all haven't caught it. And he fanned the flames. They're eating dogs, they're eating cats. He fanned those damn flames. Okay. Fear of the other. Okay. And the other thing was the economy, inflation, taxation, cost of living, rent, everything. Okay. So let this be a lesson because we in Canada are feeling this as well. I'm gonna be real honest with you here. Donald Trump racked up an $8 trillion deficit in his time in the office. Someone fact checked me on that. I believe it was 8 trillion. The pandemic happened. Joe Biden took over. Joe Biden was a disaster. People were like, "Nah, it was better with the orange guy." Well, here's the thing about the orange guy. And here's the thing about the old senile guy that took over after him who likes to sniff everyone's hair. Senile guy who likes to sniff everyone's hair took over after a pandemic. The problem is your economy is going to suffer for the decisions you've made in the past. You're electing a person who absolutely mishandled an election, mishandled, failed to concede the election, spewed all sorts of rhetoric about everything being rigged. He's like a child. You've elected a child into the most powerful office in the world. And you should be very scared about that. This is an indictment not of Americans being racist. This is not an indictment of Americans being bigoted. This is not an indictment only of Americans hating women or hating gay people or hating free choice. This is an indictment of the American education system. This is an indictment of critical thought on a decline. It is an indictment of impatience and selfish virtue signaling. That's what it's an indictment of. So, you think the Democratic Party is for you? The Democratic Party has literally wanted more government. You know, it's interesting. We lived around a lot of people who are on welfare, so these people wait for welfare checks every single month, and you get donations, you get food stamps. That was a lot of my childhood. We didn't take the food stamps unless we were really dying, in dire need. But a lot of people around us did. And what we realized over some period of time when you grow up is you realize that that's actually a trap. Call it the food stamp trap, because someone is giving you just enough to keep you satisfied, to keep you down. You know what I mean? And open borders, all these things, these are valid concerns. If you are really just letting anybody over, maybe that is a concern for national security, especially if crime is going up. But crime is going up proportionately to the fact that that the economy is going down. This has always been the case. The problem starts when people cannot talk to each other. When a Trump supporter cannot talk to a Kamala supporter, cannot talk to a Hillary supporter, if they cannot have that discussion, that's where the problem starts. Number one. Number two, when people cannot listen at all. Like I talk to a lot of people, and sometimes I notice that these people just don't listen. A lot of people don't listen. Your attention span is so important. You know, I showed my girlfriend yesterday, and she was talking about Trump versus Kamala, and she was asking me who I'm voting for and all that stuff. So I showed her Jimmy Kimmel 15-minute SNL, I don't know what, Jimmy Kimmel Live on Donald Trump, in which he obliterated the man, made every soundbite to make him look absolutely ridiculous. Okay. And she formed the opinion that Donald Trump was not of sane mind, which is probably true, and that he was the worst presidential candidate in the history of the world. And my girlfriend doesn't know very much, if anything, about politics. And then I put on the Joe Rogan interview for her with Donald Trump, which is, I think, 2 hours. And they discuss a plethora of topics. And then there was the Elon and Joe Rogan one, which she listened to as well. And she walked away from that. She's like, he sounds a lot more sensible here. Not good, but sensible. And that's the point. You don't want to go through a 3 hour Tucker Carlson interview or an AOC interview or a Kamala interview. You want the highlights. You want the highlights, which means you're always going to put the onus of your critical thought in the hands of somebody else. Don't let people tell you what to think, man. Make up your mind for yourself and don't vote only for your pain. Consider other people's pain as well. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to get at. An hour into this live, 20 minutes into this political talk, that's really what I'm trying to get at. Is you only see your own pain. You see your grocery bill. Do you see the pain of other people who will suffer because of this person? That's the question to be asked. Do you know anybody? The echo chambers. We are living in a very dangerous society. And honestly, if you told me the Democratic Party just falls off hard, unless they really reconstruct themselves for 2028, if Trump has a reasonable, like disaster-free presidency, which is like almost seems oxymoronic and damn near impossible, I would not be surprised for another Republican candidate to come. And maybe they're not as obviously stupid as Donald Trump. Maybe they're smoother. Maybe they're a better talker, like a JD Vance. Maybe JD Vance is the Republican nominee next time. And if Trump and his economy, and here's the crazy thing, y'all don't understand economics. A lot of people don't understand economics, which is why they're so easy to trick. I'm gonna confess something to y'all that I've only confessed to a few people. Okay. And this is, a pretty large admission. So I'm just gonna be very real about it. But this community is like family. So let's just be real about it. In 2020, I was part of a COVID think tank. The think tank was based out of Boston, and I was brought on largely because work had stopped for me. I was a filmmaker, didn't have Pensar basketball at the time, and I was just largely looking to help because I had this idea in my mind that one day I'm gonna have kids, and they're asking me what I did during this time, and I want to tell them I did something to positively impact change in countries that I cared about that maybe they were not. So I think I brought it up before that I was part of a COVID think tank, but largely I was brought on not for scientific knowledge because I have very little scientific knowledge, but rather due to my data knowledge, my ability to project models and numbers. So I was brought into this think tank and it was about 78 people to start. And I tell you, every single person was way smarter than me. I mean, it was very fascinating to talk to people because in my regular life, I don't talk to a lot of scientists. I talk to some, not a lot. So it's cool to talk to these people and you're talking to them. And when the vaccines were rolled out, we did a straw poll and just asked everybody how many of the people were gonna take the vaccine and which vaccine they were gonna take. And of the at the time 86 people, less than 30, I think it was like 34, said they were taking it. These were some of the most plugged in, most informed people in the world at this. These were people who devoted day and night to the numbers, to the data. We are people that talked to doctors, hospitals. We talked to hospitals in developing countries. We talked to hospitals in India. We talked to the first hospital in Wuhan where the outbreak happened. We talked to policymakers in Croatia, in Slovenia, to help these developing countries, smaller countries, not developing countries, smaller countries, manage the crisis, manage the spread so that they can communicate with each other because there wasn't a clear documentation and that was shocking to me. So I made an executive decision not to get the vaccine. And my girlfriend didn't either. And we did that based on the fact that we did not trust the rollout. And we said, we're going to wait because there's no way to know if this is going to work. We did not endanger anybody. We did not go out for months. We would pretty much limit contact with other human beings. And the first time I told somebody that I hadn't, because I had to confess that because the invite to event the event that we were trying to get into required you to provide proof of vaccination. And I just said, listen, I can't come to this thing. She looked at me like I believed the earth was flat. And I will always stand on my decision to not let them do that to me. And if you're going to call me an anti vaxxer, you're insane because I've had plenty of vaccines throughout my life. I did not trust the science behind this one. And you know what? Of all the super smart people I know, not one of them took it. Not one. But listen to the mega media machine that was trying to tell every single person that didn't take it that they were anti-humanity, that they were terrible people. The point of this entire thing, this discussion, which has been a bit of a winding road in which I have offered perspectives and thoughts on politics and humanity is largely this: think for yourself and be willing to have discussions about it with people who don't agree with you. It is so important that we continue to have discussions, which means I will discuss with you if you believe Donald Trump is the worst person on earth and if you believe he's great. And I believe that the power of our society is built on the discussions we are willing to have. I have watched, I have read about many societies in which conversations could not be had. Those conversations include Nazi Germany. Those conversations include Cold War, um, Cold War era Russia, Soviet Union. These are not places you would like to idolize or recreate. You do not want to be pro censorship. If it hurts someone's feelings, you need to talk about it. We need to be a lot more grown up as a society. And we need to be able to have these honest discussions without the fear of censorship. And I don't want people telling people what to think. Rather, that's the blanket solution. That's the blanket solution. The truth is, we need to have discussions about education reform and prioritizing education. We need to have real discussions in this country and across the world about what diet and exercise and the state of our brains is going through in the age of social media. Because I'll tell you right now, you want a great litmus test on how sharp your brain is on a day to day basis? Go test it. Go test the decline of your brain when you're on social media. Just go test it. You need to take care of your mind. You need to consistently learn about things, and you need to stop trusting people to give you information that you could easily, within 20 minutes of research, dig up for yourself. Be an independent thinker. The world needs more independent thinkers. The world needs more roads, not more highways. All right. That's what I wanted to say. I have no idea what the results of this video is going to be. I have no idea what the response is going to be. But we built this entire community on truth. I'm sure a lot of people today woke up feeling like, if you're a woman, you felt like America voted against you. If you're a person of color, you may have felt America voted against you. If you are a Democrat or a liberal or someone who believes in trans rights, homosexual rights, gay marriage, abortion, you might believe that America just voted against you, and it might scare you. My only request to you is just be willing to have a conversation about it. Because when you start talking to these people, you'll understand that you have way more in common with them than you think. They look different. They may sound different. They do different things. Maybe you're a lawyer from the East Coast and they're a farmer in Louisiana. But at the end of the day, you have a lot in common. You're human beings. You care about your children. You want those children to live in a better world. You just have a fundamental disagreement about what that better world looks like. All right. I'll talk to y'all later. Have a good one. Enjoy your day. I'm gonna talk to y'all later after the game. We're gonna do a post game live. I hope it's a lit one. I hope the Raptors win, and we can start talking about good things. I hope Gradey has another great performance. And if you're fiending for basketball content, I was on the panel today. It's time stamped in the comments, and I talked a lot of good stuff about Gradey Dick versus Amen Thompson, and we got into that debate. All right. Talk to you guys later. Bye. And please like the video on your way out.